6th meeting of the St. Bernard Village Council will please come to order. We invite you to stand for prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber for the betterment of our fellow citizens. Lead us that we may do all things well. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would like to ask for a moment of silence. Mrs. Sandy Schrank, who works down in the fitness center, her mother passed away this week, and if we could have a moment of silence for her. Thank you. All right, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brickwig?
Here.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Here.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Here.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Here.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Present.
Let the record show that 6 members are present, 1 member is absent, who was actually here and had to go on an emergency out of here. So, members of council, what is your pleasure on the reading of the last minutes?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to dispense with the reading of the last minutes.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to dispense with the reading of the last minutes. Are there any remarks? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Members of council, are there any errors or corrections to the minutes as submitted? If not, the minutes will stand as submitted. We'll move to reports of city officials. Mayor, Mr. Stuchel.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. President. This evening, you have ordinance number 2 and 3 in front of you for consideration for the proposed charter amendments. Ordinance number 2 deals with the proposed charter amendments related to village council and other elected officials, where you would transition from a 4-ward, 3 at-large council to a 7-person at-large council. It would also transition council members from a 2-year term to a 4-year staggered overlapping term commencing the first day of December after the election. At the first municipal election after the adoption of the charter, the 3 candidates receiving the largest number of votes shall be elected to 4-year terms in office, and the 4 candidates receiving the next highest number of votes shall be elected to 2 years in office. Thereafter, all members of council shall be elected to 4-year terms in office. The vice mayor / president of council shall also be elected to the office for the term of 4 years, commencing the first day of December after the election. And lastly, this was almost an oversight, but since we were focusing on council, the mayor will also be aligned with the council, taking office December 1st after the next election. Ordinance number 3 deals with converting the position of Director of Public Safety Service into an appointed municipal administrator to serve as the village's chief administrative official, the consolidation of the elected auditor and treasurer positions to an appointed finance director to serve as chief financial officer of the village, and the transition of the elected law director into an appointed law director with a background in municipal law. Also, after speaking with the attorney that was revising us through this process, we will need to suspend with the second and third readings due to it taking 30 days for it to be in effect, which would not allow us to have this in by March 5th. Also, I would like to thank Don Middendorf and his students and families who cleaned up Girl Scout Lane. Thank you for caring so much in advance of our annual spring cleanup. Also, I was contacted by Craig Barenhouse from Troop 354 regarding Scout Night. I wanted to make sure that council would like for them to participate, and I would be in favor of them being paired with a council member and village official to read our reports. I know that wasn't done last time, but I would also like to do that, and to extend the same opportunity to the Girl Scouts if they're willing to participate. Also, St. Clement will be hosting their annual spaghetti dinner on Monday, January 30th from 4:30 to 7 p.m. in the school cafeteria for those who are interested. And I also like to be put on the agenda for the COW to discuss the MOU for the SRO with the St. Bernard Elmwood Place School District, and also the contract for the Village of Elmwood Place for supplemental patrolling. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Just one clarification, what the mayor read in Exhibit A on Ordinance 2. It says Vice Mayor and President of Council. That's the way it's written up in our charter. That is not 2 positions. It is simply the President of Council position, but that's the way it's worded. Just so that people don't think that we're adding a position. I just wanted that clarified. All right. Thank you, Mayor. Auditor, Ms. Brickway.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the finalized numbers for 2022. The expenses were $13,835,312.94. The revenues were $17,186,310.93. So we had over $3,350,997.99 over expenses, but I also want you to remember that part of this number was also an additional little over $1 million that we paid cash for in equipment. So it was one heck of a year. On the table for tonight is resolution number 1, 2023. This is the resolution we vote on every year to use public funds for refreshments and meals when needed. Ordinance number 1, 2023 is an updated version, including the new minimum wage and a 3.5% raise for most positions. And a few more were adjusted higher to make it all work with the minimum wage going up so high and new job responsibilities. So those are the two, the ordinance and the resolution that I prepared for tonight's meeting, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Director of Law, Ms. Van Valkenburg.
Thank you. I had anticipated having a ordinance for you this evening, following up on the presentation last meeting, the committee of the whole meeting, by the owners of the pub and their attorney. He and I are still doing a little negotiating. I'm going to make sure that not only are we giving a release or vacation of the easement, but that we have it properly documented, that is in exchange for they're not looking for any funds for us toward maintenance of that property. So because we're still working on that language, taking it off the table for tonight, I will have something for you to look at and put it on the table or on the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer, Mr. Unger.
Thank you, Mr. President. The statement did not come in from First State Bank yet, so I will have that at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Safety and Service Director, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our plastic materials are becoming problematic. Our trash cans order is nearing the top, but has not yet started. I searched the internet, and this caliber of can starts at 148 unstamped. We pay 75 now stamped, so I'll continue to wait. Trash bags, I also am trying to order and am not receiving return calls, emails regarding this. I will try a little longer, but in the meantime, I'm allowing only the purchase of 1 box per quarter per resident. We normally allow them to come in and purchase a year's supply. I'm going to hold off on that until we make sure. The playgrounds also are looking more towards March. Again, that's plastics. Orchard Street bids have been opened, and JMA is going over final figures for the bids to make sure that they are correct. This construction will start shortly, and I'll keep you all posted. We are aware of street lights out on Tower. There will be pole replacements in that area. Please be patient. And to my community, I sometimes wonder if everyone can listen to their inner voice. Not the voice where you may hear, "I hope you have broccoli on your tooth for the next photo," but rather the quick moment voice of, "Don't do that, you will get hurt," and sure enough, you cut yourself. Becoming in tune with that gut feeling takes practice. You must move quickly to find another way or change your thought rapidly as you get that inkling. Once you are well versed in its existence, you will understand that it is caring and protective of each of us. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Tax Administrator, Ms. Helms.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few quick reminders. The 2022 tax year is now upon us. Just to remind everyone, your federal, state, and local, which is St. Bernard, taxes are all due by April 18th, 2023. The St. Bernard e-file portal is up and running. This is only for the 2022 tax year filing. Delinquent tax years cannot be filed through this web portal. All tax returns, either filed electronically or by paper, must include W-2s, 1099s, Federal 1040 page 1 and 2, and any federal schedules. E-file users can attach these to the e-file or submit them by paper. Your tax return cannot be audited and processed without this documentation. Paper tax form submissions must have printed documentation. All paper tax returns must be completed, signed, and dated. Incomplete forms will not be accepted. Paper tax forms with instructions are available in the tax office or on the village tax website. Please do not email tax documents or credit card information to my email. Our city email is not encrypted. The e-file portal and payment site portals are encrypted, so you can use those. If you owe $200 or more from a previous tax year balance, you are required by law to pay estimated taxes quarterly. Please call the office if you need additional information. Retirees who have an exemption do not have to file unless you have winnings of $500 or more from gambling or lottery, you have gone back to work, or you have income outside of retirement Social Security, such as rental property or business income. When in doubt, you can always give me a call at 513-242-7710. That concludes my report.
Thank you. We'll move to reports of standing committees. Safety, Mr. Brickway.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight I have the monthly fire department report for December. As far as the fire goes, structure fires, there were 7. There were one other fire, 1 vehicle fire, 7 auto accidents, 3 hazmat incidents, service calls 10. There were 14 fire alarms. There was 1 CO alarm and 13 EMS assists for a total of 57 fire responses. As far as mutual aid given, Norwood 8, Elmwood Place 5, Cincinnati 2, Lockland 2, Springfield Township 1. Mutual aid received. Firewise, Norwood 1, Reading 1, Wyoming 1, Lockland 1, and Springfield Township 1. And as far as EMS runs go, there were a total of 95 ambulance runs, with 42 of those being transports. And I would also like to report that St. Bernard hosted a hazmat IQ course attended by several other community departments, and all units completed hazmat tech refresher. And that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Service, Ms. Housefeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. The waste collection fee for the month of November 2022 is $23,957.68. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Public improvements, Mr. Bob Culbertson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The CIC met this past Tuesday and received a presentation from the development group for the St. Bernard Shopping Center. I would encourage everybody that can to go on the village or Facebook page to actually see that presentation. And thanks to Auditor Brickway for putting the slides on the Facebook post just so they can actually see the slides. But the gist of that meeting was they are in the final processes of finalizing the design. That should be within any day now. And then once they do that, 4 to 6 months was the estimated timeline they gave us to kind of get the ball moving and get all the permits and everything in place before you would actually start seeing demolition. So fingers crossed, everything goes well. In 4 to 6 months, we start seeing some progress down at the square. The other topic that was at the CIC was anybody that's interested in doing the lawn care and mowing for the properties that the CIC owns for the calendar year of 2023. The application and package will be available at City Hall. So if you're interested, stop down to the hall and pick that up. And those are due back on February 27th at 5 p.m. You can either drop them off at City Hall or email the mayor directly. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Laws, contracts, and claims, Ms. Bettinghouse.
No report.
Thank you. Marketing, Mr. Ray Culbertson.
Thanks, Mr. President. The Recreation Department will be hosting sports signups on Saturday, January 28th, and on Saturday, February 4th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Rec Office in the Municipal Building. Activities include knot-hole baseball for ages 7 to 13. Cost is $40 for residents, $60 for non-residents. Girls softball ages 7 to 13. Same cost, $40 for residents, $60 for non-residents. Swim lessons, which is all ages, is $20. Mommy and Me swim lessons, ages 6 months to 36 months. They'll take place on Thursday evenings in March. Cost is $20. Stingray swim team, $40 for residents, $60 for non-residents. T-ball, ages 4 to 7, $20. Say Soccer, ages 6 to 13, $40 for residents, $60 for non-residents. And Lollipop Soccer, ages 3 to 5, is $20. Another reminder that the Rec Department is accepting applications for summer employment at the Aquatic Center. This includes lifeguards and support staff. Deadline to submit your application is Monday, February 6th. And I know this is like, we hear this all the time, but I once again want to say thanks to the Service Department for their excellent snow removal. It doesn't go unnoticed. Thanks. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Business and Industry, Mr. Schultmeyer.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Committee of the Whole, Ms. Stegman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minutes were submitted Wednesday, January 25th, and I have no communications this evening.
Thank you. Since that's the case, if you could give the first reading of Resolution Number 1, 2023.
Resolution number 1, 2023, authorizing the use of village funds to purchase meals or refreshments for village employees or other persons as serving a public purpose and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of Resolution Number 1, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of Resolution Number 1, 2023.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to suspend with the second and third reading Resolution Number 1, 2023. Are there any remarks? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt Resolution Number 1, 2023.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to adopt Resolution Number 1, 2023. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Or Resolution Number 1, 2023 is adopted as read. Clerk, if you could please give the first reading of Ordinance Number 1, 2023.
Ordinance number 1, 2023, fixing the compensation of those part-time and certain appointed employees of the Village of St. Bernard and declaring an emergency.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of Ordinance Number 1, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of Ordinance Number 1, 2023.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to suspend with the second and third reading of Ordinance Number 1, 2023. Are there any remarks? Not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on Ordinance Number 1? Not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt Ordinance Number 1, 2023.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to adopt Ordinance Number 1, 2023. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance Number 1, 2023 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of Ordinance Number 1, Ordinance Number 2, 2023.
Ordinance number 2, 2023, an ordinance submitting to the electors of St. Bernard certain amendments to the charter related to village council.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of Ordinance Number 2, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of Ordinance Number 2, 2023.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Hausfeld to suspend with the second and third reading of Ordinance Number 2, 2023. Are there any remarks? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on Ordinance Number 2, 2023? If not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Rickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Hausfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to adopt Ordinance Number 2, 2023.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Housefeld to adopt ordinance number 2, 2023. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Ordinance number 2, 2023 is adopted as read. Clerk, will you please give the first reading of ordinance number 3, 2023?
Ordinance number 3, 2023, an ordinance submitting to the electors of St. Bernard certain amendments to the charter related to village administration.
Members of council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 3, 2023. What is your pleasure?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 3, 2023.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Ms. Housefeld to suspend with the second and third reading of ordinance number 3, 2023. Are there any remarks? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council on ordinance 3? Not, clerk, will you please call the roll on suspension?
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Members of council, what is your pleasure on adoption?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 3, 2023.
I'll second that.
A motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to adopt ordinance number 3, 2023. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brickwig?
Aye.
Ms. Housefeld?
Aye.
Mr. Bob Culbertson?
Aye.
Ms. Bettinghouse?
Aye.
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schildmeyer.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays. Ordinance number 3 is adopted as read. Excuse me. All right, at this time, does anyone on council have anything under old business? Does anyone on council have anything under new business?
Mr. President,
Mayor.
I guess on behalf of the Safety Service Director and myself, we are accepting applications for part-time employment, seasonal employment for the service department. So we encourage anyone to pick up an application that might be interested, or if you know of anyone, pass the word. We're always looking for great help, to assist in the upkeep of the village during the seasonal spring and summer months. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under new business? If not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address council this evening? If not, what is council's pleasure on the absent member?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bettinghouse?
make a motion to excuse the absent member.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Bettinghouse, seconded by Mr. Ray Culbertson to excuse the absent member. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. The next committee of the whole will be Thursday, February 9th at 7 p.m. This time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Ray Culbertson?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Since Mr. Ray Culbertson is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, all those in favor say hoo day. All those opposed say nay. We are adjourned.